The Russian newspapers are loaded with extraordinary stories today. There's a lot of stuff about the developments in Syria. And one story which popped out was that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had personally approved asylum for the former Syrian President Bashar Assad and his family in Moscow. And this decision has profound implications for international diplomacy and Russia's Middle Eastern policy and the narrative of loyalty versus opportunism among global powers. But it does something else as well. Because although we haven't seen President Putin, and I am mindful of the fact that every so often I use the word we, I mean any human being. I'm not suggesting for in any way that there's some sort of that I represent some sort of organization here. Every so often I think, yes, I simply speak as one member of humanity. And suddenly I'm thinking of the Brotherhood of Man song with Daniel Radcliffe, but I'm not going to break into song. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. And so what does all this do about President Putin? Because he hasn't been seen. What this does is it suggests that he's still alive and still functioning. And Dmitry Peskov is very... Oh, and Putin arranged it. Oh, yes, you can hear the clank and the jingle of ice as the fridge is opened. To set the stage, Damascus, the stronghold of the Assad regime, fell to armed opposition forces over the weekend, and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham jihadists and allied factions swiftly advanced, marking the collapse of the government that had withstood years of civil war, external interventions and international sanctions. And within hours of Damascus's fall, Assad and his family reportedly arrived in Moscow under the pretext of humanitarian grounds. Of course, as we also know, there were stories about a week earlier that Assad and his family had already arrived in Moscow. I think they'd arrived by Wednesday. So either they arrived by Wednesday and then took a quick journey back and then went back again. I don't think that's credible, really. There was even a story about President Assad's plane plunging to the ground, being caught somewhere near Aleppo. I don't think that was true either. But the fantasy that President Assad escaped in the last few hours of the siege by the rebels is one that I'm sure the Kremlin is keen to put out. No, President Assad has been holed up in Moscow for about 7 days, for about the entire period of the rebel attack. And the move by Putin, confirmed by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, underscores the intricate relationship between Moscow and Damascus, and Peskov, in his characteristic manner of elliptical phrasing, confirmed that granting asylum was a decision requiring the approval of the Russian head of state, President Putin himself. And Putin's decision highlights Russia's enduring commitment to its allies, even in defeat. Russia stands by its allies, can't keep them in power, but it stands by its allies. Come with us, come to Moscow, come and see if you can get a pat of butter in the local supermarket that isn't under lock and key. Mikhail Ulyanov, a senior Russian diplomat, framed this action as a testimony to Russia's loyalty, contrasting it with what he described as the United States' propensity to abandon allies when convenient. And this narrative serves Moscow's broader strategy of positioning itself as a more reliable partner in the global arena. By granting asylum, Russia shields Assad from possible prosecution or exile to an adversarial nation where he could possibly face prison. And this move protects not just an ally, but also Moscow's broader Middle Eastern strategy, ensuring that the fall of Assad doesn't translate into a complete Russian retreat from the region. And this asylum agreement appears to be part of a larger negotiation, because reports suggest that Assad agreed to step down in return for guarantees of safety for his family and a peaceful transfer of power. Whether this transfer truly leads to stability remains uncertain, especially given the volatile nature of Syria's political and militant landscape. For opposition groups, it signals a partial victory. The removal of Assad, long considered a non-negotiable demand by anti-government factions, shifts the power dynamic, yet the question remains, what follows without Assad? The risk of further fragmentation or dominance by extremist factions like HTS looms large, but HTS has promised that it is no longer a reactionary, anti-libertarian force, that it's prepared to nurture other traditions, other cultures, other religions. We should take it at its word, and we should make sure that it can keep its word. The asylum move is symbolic on several levels. First, it demonstrates that Assad, who once stood defiant, has joined the ignominious club of leaders forced into exile following the footsteps of figures like Saddam Hussein, Mr. Gaddafi. And second, it reinforces the Kremlin's role as a global power willing to challenge Western narratives of justice and accountability. But this decision is not without risk to Russia and the Kremlin. Housing Assad might invite further criticism and sanctions from the West. Moreover, it complicates Moscow's relations with other Middle Eastern players, particularly Turkey and Iran, both of whom have stakes in Syria's future. Peskov's calculated vagueness about Assad's whereabouts and any planned meeting with Putin serves as a reminder of Russia's penchant for ambiguity when it comes to the actions of their current president. By keeping specifics unclear, Moscow retains flexibility in shaping future narratives about Assad's role and Putin's whereabouts, be it as a silent exile or an advisory figure in Syrian politics from afar, or simply noises from the fridge, like some sort of unintended post-mortem flatulence. Russia's message to the world, however, is clear. Loyalty to allies in crises enhances its credibility as a power that doesn't bow to international pressure. This contrasts sharply with the American approach, which has seen allies like Afghanistan's former government leaders abandoned in the wake of US withdrawal. Well, the Afghan withdrawal was a chaos and a crisis and a shame that we should be hanging our heads over. But I'm not sure that Moscow can necessarily say that it's done things better. In times like this, we shouldn't really be making a comparison between this is what Moscow does and this is what America does, or this is what Britain does. Raab was wrong to be sunning himself on a beach in Crete. We were wrong to abandon Kabul. It doesn't make Moscow any better, does it? You know, this idea of waving the flag for one particular team. No, there is one absolute right action. And people fall short of that. And we must call them out. So in granting asylum to Assad, Russia reasserts its influence on the global stage. Well, it tries to, demonstrating both calculated pragmatism and a willingness to accept reputational risks for strategic gains. The fall of Damascus is not just a turning point for Syria, but a test of Russia's resilience in a rapidly shifting global landscape. What remains to be seen is how this asylum arrangement will play out. Will Assad fade into obscurity? Will he be found on a side street in Moscow doing some sort of knitting or opening his own little optical surgery shop? Assad spectacles. Make a spectacle of yourself. Come and have an eye-tad with Mr. Assad. Former President Assad will look into your eyes. Beady me. Will Assad go quietly? Or will Moscow find a way to leverage his presence for continued influence in Syria? One thing is certain. Russia's role in the Middle East remains as complex and as consequential as ever. Whether Assad is there to broker that role, or whether Assad is in Moscow, Russia is not going to leave that particular theatre quietly. It's not bowing out.